Okay, so in addition to Wikipedia, there are um, two other types of sources that we can use for lateral reading that we can just have in our toolbox for lateral reading. Again, we want to be flexible, so these aren't our only sources for lateral reading, but they are ones that we can just know. Like, you need to know some places you can trust, and these are some places you can trust. So the first category is fact-checking organizations. So fact-checking organizations like the three on this slide, PolitiFact, FactCheck, and Snopes, publish stories about specific websites or groups behind websites. These fact-checking organizations are generally trustworthy. Their goal is to not take a political perspective. They fact-check stories about conservatives and liberals, and they have many of the markers of authoritative organizations, including writers with backgrounds in journalism and editing processes in place to help ensure their stories are accurate. Fact-checking stories should provide explanations and evidence for any claims they make about an organization. So again, same thing. You're trusting that they're credible because you've been told they're credible, but you also verify that with the fact that they are supporting their own arguments with sources, with their own sources as well. So here's an example. If you want to read laterally with a fact-checking organization, we have this article from Real News Right Now. President Trump orders the execution of 5 turkeys pardoned by Obama. So if we wanted to find out about Real News Right Now, what is Real News Right Now? If we searched for it on Snopes, if we search for Real News Right Now, we might see the Snopes result titled Real News Right Now Archive. So the archive includes stories that Snopes has written that include Real News Right Now. And these sources identify the website as a satirical website. So, for example, this is an article, this is the Snopes article about the turkey pardon. And you can see that it says, like all content published by Real News Right Now, the story was satirical in nature. So, in addition to telling you that this story is not true, it also tells you about Real News Right Now. Real News Right Now is a satirical organization. It's a publication that publishes satire. So again, it's a fake news source. Our third category of lateral reading resources is news organizations. So traditional journalists write news stories that address websites, organizations, and authors. So when you're reading laterally, you can look for news stories. Just remember that not everything that calls itself journalism is necessarily created equal. If you're not sure about how reliable a news organization is, you can skip it or read laterally about it. So if you're looking at a news story but you're not familiar with the news organization, you can do lateral reading again to find out about that organization. Or you can say, well, I don't know this one, so I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go to one that I know I can trust. For example, when we search for Employment Policies Institute, we see an article. We see articles written by outlets like the New York Times and the New York Times story. If we clicked on the story at the top of this list here, the New York Times story says, just blocks from the White House is the headquarters of the Employment Policies Institute, a widely quoted economic research center whose academic reports have repeatedly warned that increasing the minimum wage can be harmful, increasing poverty and unemployment. But something fundamental goes unsaid in the Institute's reports. The nonprofit group is run by a public relations firm that also represents the restaurant industry as part of a tightly coordinated effort to defeat the minimum wage increase that the White House and Democrats in Congress have pushed for. So by reading what the New York Times article says about the Employment Policies Institute, we get some sense of how credible they are, which is, in this case, not super, right? It's not fake news like we've been looking at with our other two examples. But in this case, it is an organization that is specifically trying to defeat a minimum wage, which means they're going to be their information is going to be skewed towards that perspective. So they're not going to be an especially neutral and credible source about the minimum wage, right? You would want to, at least, if you were going to use them as a source, you want to at least acknowledge that and probably balance them out with another source, or just don't use it and go use a more neutral source, because it is possible to make arguments That's what they're doing, right? The Equal Employment Policies Institute is making its argument based on evidence it's gleaning from other sources. You need to be using those neutral sources as well to make your point, not starting with the biased source. All right, so this last slide is just going over reminding you of what those three resources are. So Wikipedia, remember, it's a good source for both using the Wikipedia article about an organization and then also its own sources. So the links at the bottom of the Wikipedia page. Fact-checking organizations, the three that we talked about in this slideshow were PolitiFact, Snopes, and FactCheck, and then news articles. And again, remember with news, you want to make sure that it's an organization you have heard of or that you have researched so that you know why you're trusting this news source. Okay, so that is it for our overview of resources. Now you're going to do this on your own. So you have two websites articles that you're going to research who is the organization sponsoring this information, and tell me what you think about how trustworthy they are.